Who was the half-human, half-Nepean lieutenant who committed suicide due to violent empathic echoes in the ship's warp coils? Does that sound vague, remotely familiar?
It weirdly does not. I just watched all the TNG episodes.
So that's what I was thinking. Like I chose this one because like it does not sound even slightly familiar to me. uh, so I'll ask it again.
Yeah.
Who was the half human, half Nepean? It's Napean lieutenant who committed suicide due to violent empathic echoes in the ship's warp coils.
I think I remember
Here
this
are
one
our
now.
choices.
I remember this one now. This episode.
Okay.
Yep.
A. Lieutenant Daniel Kwan. B. Lieutenant William Hodges. C. Ensign Dern. Or D. Ensign Rayner.
Wow.
Because I'm still trying to grok. Like, what?
He doesn't like the game because his friends don't like him.
Welcome to A Piece of the Action. I'm Micah.
I'm Eric.
And I'm Greg.
And today we're going to be looking at Sidereal Confluence. All right, Sidereal Confluence, 2017 it came out. BGG lists the designer as Tau Ceti Dijkman. Is that correct? Named after a star.
That's what he goes by. Yeah.
He or she goes by. I don't know. Okay. Tau Ceti Dijkman, 4 to 9 players, which is kind of an interesting player count. Goes from 120 to 180 minutes. We got together and played this. All three of us played this together, as well as, I don't know, 3 or 4 other people. So we're going to get into you guys' thoughts on Sidereal Confluence. So first of all, Greg, why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of kind of a premise and a summary to introduce this game to us, please.
I'm going to give a higher overview than normal for this game because there's a lot of intricacies in the game, but essentially it boils down to over 6 rounds, I believe it is. There's what I think of as 2 main phases. There's an economy phase where basically you have these converter cards that take certain kind of cubes, these resources. There's little cubes of different colors, larger cubes of different color. There's little octagons. They all have names. I do not remember any of the names, except for the octagon is Ultratech, I think. But I think we just call them blue cubes and such. Anyways, it takes those cubes and you just convert them. It's literal cube conversion where you just convert them into other cubes that are of higher value. That's basically the trade phase, and you have these different converters that do that. And then kind of the core of the game is like a trade phase that goes on where you're taking your output cubes and you're trading with all the other players at the table simultaneously. It's just open negotiation, trying to get the cubes that you need to do this conversion process the next round. That's the basic gist of the game. The core of the game too, though, I think of is there's 9 asymmetric races, species that you can take, and each of them have some pretty seriously rule-breaking exception to what they do. And I cannot possibly go over all of those right now, but they all just do different things. Like one race, for example, just creates wild resources. Every resource that they make is wild and can be used for like any color. And so their resources that they make are a little bit more valuable than what the other ones make. But everyone has like a rule, something that breaks the rules in that way. So that's kind of the other component of the game that's a big deal. There's also a bidding phase where you're bidding for future research teams that can turn the technologies. You get like 1 turn free use of them, and then you share that technology with the whole table. You get victory points for that. And you're also bidding on colonies, which basically give you resources too. There's a lot going on there. We'll probably talk more in detail about the different things as we go, but that's the basic overview of the rules.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about its theme. Eric, how do you feel like, first of all, what do you think, what theme do you think it was shooting for, and how do you think it did?
So the theme it's after is tied up in the name Sidereal has to do with stars. Confluence is like a coming together. And the designer at one point was like, this game is basically space convention, but I didn't want to call it that. So he came up with two words that effectively
mean
mean the
space
same
convention.
thing. Yeah. So this is Sidereal Confluence. It is a group of up to 9 different species coming together to try and determine how to progress how to advance civilization together. They're trying to work together, basically. The theme is that while all of the races, all of the species of aliens are trying to create a unified government together, they all want the government to be built off of their own ideals, off of their own species, like morals and ethics and things like that. So you want to be on top when everybody decides that they're happy with everything. That's done through victory points, but that's the theme of the game. As far as how well it did, I think Greg already hinted at this a little bit in that he said that it's just basically it's Space Cube. The game effectively is what it is, and then it's absolutely right there. The theme does not come through at all, and in fact, I would say that trying to think about the theme in this game is actually detrimental, because if you are actually trying to make the theme work in your head, that means you're taking extra time and looking up, okay, what is this blue cube? What does it represent? Like, what am I actually trying to trade for? And that's going to slow you down. And this game, I don't know if you mentioned this, Greg, but it's a real-time game. So it's real-time trading, and you have a timer. So if you're trying to put theme into this game, if you're trying to get as much theme as this game has to offer, you're actually going to be shooting yourself in the foot strategically. The asymmetry of the game, it tries to help. I usually really like it when games present a lot of asymmetry, which this game has loads of asymmetry in it. But considering without the time to consider what your races are doing and get into the theme, because you don't have that time, it doesn't really come through at all. However, that having been said, I like the theme. I really like the idea of it. It's just that the gameplay there's so much pressure in the gameplay that it doesn't come through. It's not allowed to come through.
Okay, interesting. I don't know if there's I feel like there should be a term of art for that like it's thematic versus anti-thematic, if it's actually detrimental to bring the theme in.
There's been a few components of games that we've talked about in the past on this channel where it was kind of a similar thing, where I thought that thinking too hard about the theme actually hurts you in the game. But this is probably the worst one, simply because of the timer aspect.
Okay. Well, so then with that said, you've kind of described what it doesn't feel like. Well, let's talk about feel of play. Eric, how does it feel when you're playing Sidereal Confluence to you?
It feels like a trading game. It feels like Pit. If you've played Pit, a lot of people play that card game where you're trying to trade cards back and forth and get a set before anybody else can get a set. It feels like that. It feels stressful like that. But in addition to that, it feels, and this is, again, we've talked about this before, and this is like a loaded term for me, but it feels semi-cooperative. In the sense that all economic games can have a semi-cooperative feel to it, because you can't go it alone. The game does not let you go it alone. So you have to trade with everyone else, but at the same time, you are trying to get out on top at the end. So the timer makes it stressful, and the trading aspect makes it feel kind of semi-cooperative.
Refresh me. Have you said before, do you tend to be anti-semi-co-op?
I like semi-co-op when it's like this, when it is baked in because of the mechanics of the game. If you try to force a game to be semi-co-op, I think that almost always fails. But in a game like this, where it's only semi-cooperative in the sense that you don't have enough resources, so you have to trade with everyone else. That kind of semi-co-op I like.
Okay. All right.
I would, in my mind, I would separate that from semi-co-op, because I don't think it was a semi-co-op at all, as shared incentives. It's kind of what this game has, maybe. So that's probably the key difference.
What's the difference as far as you're concerned?
Well, semi-co-op usually means, and I mean, this is a can of worms to open up, but if you go on BGG and look at a semi-co-op thread, it's usually like 500 pages long arguing about semi-co-op. But in my mind, semi-co-op usually means there's a group win that has to happen, the cooperative win. And then there can also be someone that singularly wins. So in order for me to win the game, I have to both win my individual goal and the group win. Anyways, that's why I don't want to get too deep into it, because I don't think of this game that way at all. And it's kind of off topic, but
okay. Well, how did it feel to play?
So, but with shared incentive, what I think this game does have is one, multiple players have the same goal.
Okay.
That's it. So like it's advantageous for us to like trade this, because it's good for you, it's good for me, right? So that's just to talk a little bit about the theme, because I agree with Eric, and it's almost aggressively anti-thematic to me. It's a funny, but it's funny because if you flip over the alien cards that you get, there's a huge story about it, and I kind of feel like if you spent the time studying the lore of this game, maybe you get more theme out of it. But then if you think about it too hard, it's like, for example, the technology cards are just named nonsense, and I can't understand how the goods you put into it actually work for it. I mean, there's stuff like, I'm just looking up cards online, like there's things called cultural diffusionologists that you make, temporal dilation. It's just like these weird,
just
what is it?
Sci-fi buzzwords.
A chrono analysis. Yeah, it's just like, to me, unless I'm just not smart enough to understand all this, it's just a bunch of techno babble.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
so that for me is like, it almost like with all the lore it puts in this game, it kind of encourages you to look into the theme. But I think once you start doing that, it's kind of like Eric said, you realize, there's
no reward for it.
There's no real theme going on. Not that I look for theme anyways. So for me,
by the way, before you go on, we should be clear that we are reviewing the old version of this game. So they did reprint this, and I don't know if they cleaned up some of the massive amounts of lore. I know that they didn't change any of the mechanics, but the aesthetics have changed. So they might have changed some of that.
Sure, they might have, yeah. But anyways, I don't usually look for theme in games anyways, but sometimes I'll pick it up tangentially as I'm playing the game. I picked up nothing here. For me, it's just pure cube resource conversion, which doesn't bother me. I'm okay with that. So that gets me in the feel of play. It does feel it's two beasts here, right? You got the Euro-y resource conversion, which is as blatant of a cube pusher as you can possibly get. I mean, it's as dry as it gets. These cubes turn into these cubes. So there's that. But then you got dashes of this semi-party game like trading sessions, because the whole thing just opens up, and it does get a little, I wouldn't quite call it party game, but it feels a little more chaotic, social, I guess, a little more social, a little more chaotic than the Euro part of the game. It's also a pretty dense game, and there's just a lot of little puzzles to kind of figure out for your particular species as you go. And overall, I would say that that's what it is. It's a dry game that is broken up with spontaneous real-time trading. So that's the best way I can explain it, I guess.
Let's go ahead then and spend a little bit of time talking about possible strategies or priorities that you might want to keep in mind if you're coming in as a newbie to Sidereal Confluence. Let's start with you, Greg. Strats and priorities.
I think you need to make trades, period. Don't get so overwhelmed or overthink. Am I getting the best trade possible? Or maybe if I go here, I can get 1 point better difference. Well, like I feel like, don't be too stingy. Just trade, because the people who trade the most, I think, are going to fare better. So just get fairly equal trades quickly. I would say. The other thing is, we've already talked about the asymmetric powers. I think that's really the core of the game, strategy-wise. Whenever you get your alien species, look at what their special ability is, and then figure out, how am I going to use this ability to win the game? Because that's your core advantage. That's your secret weapon. So learning how to use that special ability is the key each time you play. And then finally, resources. You can get caught up in this whole resource conversion engine thing, where by the end of the game, you're just pumping out a ton of resources. But resources are not worth that many points at the end of the game. So you need to be thinking, okay, I'm getting all these resources. How do I turn that into actual victory points? And you need to be thinking about that before you get into the last turn, because you might just end up with a ton of resources and go, oh, actually, I have nothing to do with these resources. So I'd say those are my three main ideas behind playing well the first time.
Okay. All right. What about you, Eric?
So Greg mentioned the asymmetry in the different playable species, and learning what you need to play the game is going to drastically change what I'm about to say, but these are just some real broad strokes generalizations. So take this in with a big grain of salt, because depending on the different player races are so different that they can really, really change things, which is great, by the way. I love it. But my tips for this game would be, number one, like Greg said, try to make fair trades. Don't try to nickel and dime everyone to get just slightly better trades than everyone else. Make trades. You have to make trades. As the timer gets closer, maybe even trades that don't necessarily favor you all that much, just so you can make a trade. Because again, if player over there's economy breaks down, it messes you up too. So you want everybody's economy to kind of run. You just want your economy to run a little bit more efficiently than everyone else's. So to that end, to that second part about making yours run just a little bit more efficiently, what do you need to focus on? Here's what I think. I think in the first few turns of the game, you need to look at getting some colonies. Colonies come first. But then after that, you want to try to get research teams as much as possible, because research teams allow you to invent technologies. And that's where the big victory point numbers come from. They come from inventing technologies, which you need research teams to do that. So that's good in that you're going to get victory points for them. But what the technologies do is they give you another converter. Converters are how you turn some cubes into other cubes. And when you're looking at what technology you're going to shoot for, what are you going to try to invent? You want to try to invent technologies that, one, have a pretty good conversion rate. And here's something that's really handy with the cards. I'll see if this is, maybe you can throw this up there. I just picked a random card out of the box. But this is called Fiderian Relic Caches. This is just a simple example, because you see on the bottom there, it gives you a number. I think that one is 6 to 11 and a half. I don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
You'll throw it up there, I'm sure. 6 to 11 and a half. What that means is that the value of these two Ultratech is roughly, according to the in-game estimates, about worth 6 points. And when you convert it, it's going to kick out a value of 11 and a half points. That's really good. That's really good. You want to aim for technologies that give you a pretty good conversion rate, like 50 to 100% conversion rate. So shoot for things that give you a lot more cubes, basically. Mm-hmm. And then that's the first thing you're going to be looking for when you're picking which tech you want to invent. The second thing is make sure that you can actually make those two Ultratech. Because if you don't have a way to make the input, then you're not going to get the output, even if it is a great result. So that's mainly it. Make sure you're trading fair. Make sure you're trading, period. Shoot for colonies first, then shoot for research teams in order to get technologies. And the technologies that you want should have a 50 to 100% conversion rate, and they should be things that you can run. And then lastly, and this is just kind of general for the trading phase, get comfortable trading everything. You don't, it's not just cubes that you can trade. You can trade ships, you can trade cards, you can trade promises, you can trade future profit. You can say, hey, if you help me power this converter, which I can't do right now, I'll give you half of the output, your choice. Let's say I just need that one black cube or whatever. So just get things running, think outside the box, and then filter all of that advice through your particular species that you're playing, and see if that helps.
All right, now we're going to talk about the good and the bad of Sidereal Confluence. Let's begin with the good. What did you guys like about this game? Let's start with you, Greg.
Yeah, the major obvious good for me here is the player count. It goes, it's like 3 to 9. Is it lower than 3?
4 to 9 is what it says on BGG.
4 to 9. Okay,
4 to 9.
That makes more sense. It plays up to 9 players.
Yeah, that's huge.
And which is huge. There's not many games that do that, and it doesn't really add. I've not played a full 9-player game, but we've played quite a few with.
I thought we had.
Counts. Have we played a full 9-player?
I thought we played a full 9.
Maybe
how many? It was what, 6 when we played, right?
When we played, it was 6, but we've played this before. It was pre-pandemic, so I can't imagine think of exact numbers, but it's obviously. It's. I think we played a lot. Maybe if it wasn't 9, it was close 8 or something. But either way, whatever player count you play at, it doesn't really add a whole lot of time to the game because most of this game is simultaneous. So there's very few games I can think of that play that high. And when they do, it's normally either a party game that plays that high, or it's some long day affair you're playing. I mean, even TI4 goes to 8, I think. I mean, so that's like a all-day game. So this game plays in like 3 hours, even at 9-player, and it's not a party game. That has me interested immediately because it plays such a massive player count well. And it's still strategic. Yeah, I said the trading part feels a little party game-ish, but in some ways it feels like a very cerebral party game, if that makes sense. I
think what Eric was saying about the creativity you can have in the trades kind of adds to that. You know, the fact
yeah, absolutely.
Just anything you can manage to whip up in your head that would work as a trade for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of my points actually I'm going to come up with here.
Mm-hmm.
But just to focus on that player count a little bit, it's just there's just no other game that does that. So that also slots in with my other great points about this game is I can't really think of another game that does this. There's when I talk about these other games that we've reviewed in the past, I go, this is a fun game, but there's a lot of other games that kind of do this too. I cannot think of any other game that plays like this game does. There's nothing else I can really compare it to. Some people compare it to Cosmic Encounter because of the asymmetry, but I really don't think that's a fair comparison.
And the trades too.
Like
Cosmic Encounter has a
it's
big
probably the
component.
Closest game maybe you can compare it with, but this feels way more crunchy than Cosmic Encounter to me.
Oh yeah,
there's
definitely.
A lot more Euro-y stuff going on here. So it's even that I don't think is a great comparison. So, but I think it's a good thing to me. The idea that the game kind of stands on its own, you don't come across games like that nowadays very much anymore. So that's a definite plus for me. The asymmetric powers, I love asymmetric powers. I'm always on board with that, and the asymmetric powers here are very different. And I've played this enough that every time I sit down and I get a new alien species, it's a different puzzle. So at the very least, you have to play this game 9 times before you even start playing the same. If you play a different one every time, before you start playing the same alien twice. So that's like 9 different puzzles that you have to go through before you even begin to recycle. I just think that's great. So it gives you kind of a new experience each time. And yeah, with the trading, I think the trading is neat here. I've always liked games that have very open trading. Even when I was a kid, when we played Monopoly, I would only play if people agreed to like super open trading. Like you can just trade everything. We would trade like, okay, I'll give you 4 free drops on my properties before you have to pay me again if you do this thing for me. Like I was always open for that, like the open negotiation to make the game fun when I was a kid. So that feels that way to me. You can just trade pretty much anything. You can trade even your converters. Like here, okay, you get this converter for a turn. because I'm not going to use it anyways. And so that does allow you to be very clever with your trades. You can think of ways to do things in an interesting way. We talked about future trades. That's such a great one because you can really start. It almost feels like you're investing or you're taking loans out to get something better in return later. Because a single black cube in the first turn is a different value than that same cube in turn 3, because you're getting more and more goods as you go. So it's just keeping that whole thing in mind. It gives you a lot of different avenues and strings you can pull when you're trading with people, and I just think that's great. So yeah, those are my main good points.
Okay, great. Eric, what about you? What did you like about Sidereal Confluence?
So like Greg, I appreciate the uniqueness of it. I like the player count in it, but I think the thing that stands out to me about Sidereal Confluence is it's fun. It's a really fun game. It might come down to that the party game aspect of it. It's not a party game, but it has that kind of energy, that party game energy. And so when you're in the trading phase, everybody seems to have a good time with it. I don't think this has ever really bombed whenever we've played it. It's really engaging. My numbers when I'm grading a game, I have a couple of stats that I use to indicate how engaging a game is. And honestly, I feel like this one goes higher than than I allow on my star rating. It's the whole time you're playing this game, you are like fully engrossed in what you're doing. Part of that is by necessity because of the timer, and because if you don't get a trade out there, you're not going to be able to run your converters. But yeah, it's just really, really fun. The other thing is that I think it gets more fun the more you play it, because this is a very dense game. So when I get a new species to run, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I don't want the game to start because I'm still trying to grok, like, what do these guys do? I can't quite figure out how they work, how they fit into the machine that is the entire game, because it's not just me figuring out my puzzle. I also need to figure out what is important to Greg's species too, because if I want to give them something that they find valuable so that I get something that I find valuable, I need to know what he finds valuable. So I need to know what will run his engine or what's useless to him, so I don't bother. So the more you play this game, the more you figure out the finely tuned rules. I think the more fun you can have with it. And that's saying something, because it's already a really fun game.
Okay. One more point. This kind of came to my mind when Eric was talking here. The fact that there's no downtime in this game. This whole game is really simultaneous. So even with 9 players, you're pretty much active that whole 2 or 3 hours you're playing. And I think that's a positive that should be pointed out.
Okay. Right. Yeah. I felt that way. Going into a big game like that, I think I was kind of worried that it's going to slog. But I agree. I don't think it really bogged down too much.
And other than like a party game, that's pretty much the only type of game that could. How can you get 9 players and not have downtime?
Right.
I mean, drafting games maybe, but even Seven Wonders goes to 8 with an expansion.
Yeah.
That's a lot simpler than this. This is a lot crunchier.
Yeah.
It keeps it simultaneous the whole time. It's pretty impressive.
Because of all these reasons you guys are saying, it seems like it's designed to do that. So, all right. Well, let's talk then about what did you not like? What do you think it could have done better? So, Eric, we will go right back to you for where you think it could have improved.
Okay. So first, just a bunch of small things, and then my big problem with it. So we talked about how there's 0 thematic immersion. So if you like to play in a world, if you like to imagine that you are somebody or something doing something in a world, you're not going to get that at all from this game. This is all about cube conversion and talking with your friends. That's pretty much it. To that end, I don't know if this is, I have heard that this is significantly better in the reprint, but the art in this is really bad. I should have pulled up some examples, but like
we'll find
I
some
don't have
examples to
anything.
put up.
Yeah, throw some stuff on there because it ain't pretty. And the new version, though, pretty sure that they updated some of it, so it's more, at least it's more consistent, because some of the art in this is pretty inconsistent. Looks real cartoony sometimes. Next is, it is incredibly messy. This is a sprawling, huge, messy game that because it doesn't have a board, it's just cards, and everybody's getting more cards pretty much every turn, and it's turning into this massive, kind of like if you were playing a really, really long game of Terraforming Mars with 9 players. You know, you would need like 2 tables to house all the cards. So it's like that, and that can be kind of it doesn't look pretty, basically. But then my last thing, the one that has the most meat on its bone, I guess, for as far as badness is concerned, is that I think the fun level is really random. The fun depends on the group, because things can come into this game that are not necessarily dependent on the rules of the game. Like in my notes, I wrote down like meta grudges or biases. They can come into the game in the sense that, like, if you own the game or if you've played the game a lot, people are going to target you, and they're going to be like, I don't want to trade with Greg because I can tell he's winning. Well, once 1 or 2 players decide they're not going to make trades with another player, the whole game suffers. So that kind of randomness can really mess with the fun of the game. And then in addition to something I said in the good, I mentioned how it gets better the more you play it. That can be bad too if you just want to play, if you just want to have fun with the game and you don't really want to buy into this entire game. I feel like to get the most out of this game requires a much bigger buy-in than average, because the fun level, I think, and this can be good or bad. I don't really know how to put this. I kind of put it in both, because the fun level increases exponentially the more you understand the dynamics of each player species. But with a game that is as opaque as this, that's going to could take a really long time. And to really get good at this game, you need to know as much as possible about every species in play. But that's a pretty tall order for a game that is as crunchy as this. So those 2 things are my biggest issues with it. It's you got to leave the meta stuff aside, which is hard to do. And then also, if you really want to get good at this game, it's just going to take a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of had a similar thought when we were playing it, that it's like, you know, it would be hard for this to be just one of many games on the shelf. You'd have to have a dedicated group. It seems like that kind of just.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot, right?
I also think that dedicated group needs to be big. You need to have a lot of players. It doesn't work very well, in my opinion, with 4 or 5 players. It works better with 7 or 8 or 9.
Yeah. And that can be problematic, right? To
how many times can you get that many people? Yeah, exactly.
They can consistently be there. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. Was that it for your?
No, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's go into you, Greg. What do you think could have done better?
To me, Eric's negatives sounded like him admitting that he doesn't like the game because his friends don't like him.
I want to say this. That is part of it. There is part of that, because I own this game, and whenever you own a game, or if you have ever been a GM ever in your life in a role-playing game, you're going to get targeted. People don't like you. They're going to say things like, "Oh, well, we can't trust Eric because he tried to mess us up that one time 3 years ago in an RPG."
Just so the viewers out there know,
in the road.
There's underlying issues going on here. All right.
Yeah. I will say when I was playing, I really don't feel like I wanted either one of you to win. So
while I was playing, I was thinking, I remember that time Eric TPK'd our party. I'm going to take him out in this game.
Right.
Now, some of the things Eric said, I'm going to repeat some of them. I think I have a couple here. of my own. But I want to talk about the trading here. And this isn't necessarily a bad or a good thing. These are just the kind of things I feel like I should just mention, and you can decide for yourself. But a lot of games, when you do trading, for the one that pops in my head immediately when I think about trading games is Bonanza. It's just like a pure trading negotiation game. But like even Catan, which a lot of people are familiar with, in that game, both those games, trades are very structured in that the player's turn is allowed to trade with anybody, but the other players are not allowed to trade by them amidst themselves. So it creates a bit more of a structured trading system that this game does not have. It's real-time trading, and I kind of want to talk about how that changes the feel of the game. We've been talking about how it's like party game-ish. So what can happen when you do this kind of wide open pit style trading that's going on here is it does introduce timed elements to the game. So, and I don't mean by the fact that trading phases are like supposed to be timed at 10 minutes. I don't think that's ever been an issue. I feel like we're done trading before those are up. What I mean by timed elements is if you're the kind of person who likes to stop and think, okay, let me think what's the best trades I can do. Let me think about what other people have available. And you want to sit there and digest it for a little bit, it's going to be too late. Because it's open trading, if you have someone over here who's much faster and go, hey, I'll take this one, do that one, do that one, do that. And by the time you got your stuff figured out, it's too late. All the trades have already happened. So there's like this timed element where you kind of feel pressured to quickly make trades when you may want a game that's a little more structured, a little bit more, gives you time to think. So do keep that in mind. There is that real-time timed element that may not be obvious. And because of that, it also introduces other social dynamics going on that you may or may not like. For example, louder players may end up getting more trades just because they're louder or they're more charismatic. I mean, that's true with a lot of party games, but if you come in here thinking, oh, this is a Euro game, it's just resource conversion, just note that there is that layer on top. And I also find, even if you're playing, especially if you're playing with the larger player counts, that also means you're going to end up trading with the people kind of close to you more. And sometimes it's just hard to like see what Sue's over there on the other side of the table got going because it's just so far away and it's just easier to trade with the people around you. So all that together, just note that there's that element. It may not be quite as structured as you want in a trading game. That's up to you whether you like that or not, but it could be negative for some people. To me too, and this is something kind of Eric touched on, there's a lot going on here. I do think it takes a few plays to start understanding what all the alien races do and what they're capable of doing. I personally cannot parse all of that. So to me, when the trading phase of this game, as cool as it is, sometimes it feels like I'm just trading with the bank in a way because look, I just want that cube, I'll give you this cube. And I'm not 100% sitting down thinking how good of a trade that is for you, because honestly, it's just too much to parse for me. So I'm just comparing that again. If I compare it to something like Bonanza, where the state is very easy to parse, I know how badly you want this thing, and I can start getting really vicious on my trades because I know you really want this. So therefore, I'm gonna do some lopsided trades, and you get a lot of lopsided trades in those type of games that I enjoy. I enjoy that aggressive trading. I think you can get there in this game, but you have to play enough for that to be natural. And I'm not there. I look at it and I go, I have no idea what you got going over there because that's too much to parse. You got a billion cards in front of you. And, there's like 6 other players. I can't do that for everybody. So sometimes I'm just like, you know what? Cube for cube. I'm happy with that. And maybe I could have got something better. So all that together in that trading phase, you have to realize that those are could be some negatives depending on how you like your trading and negotiation games. So yeah, the other thing I will bring up is this game is, to me, a bear to teach. And I like teaching games. I'm a big fan of teaching games, actually, but I find this game is not complicated. The rule book is actually very short for this game, but there's something about this game that you can just tell with new players, they are not processing how this works.
It's deceptive, right? Because the rule book is very small, but at the same time, there's a whole extra page of rules for your species, and that's going to be the case with everybody else. So
that's true. Yeah, it's you have your own rule book, your personal rule book, basically. And then and something about this game is just, earlier I talked about this as an unusual game. I think that also comes across in the rules. You're learning this game like, this game is so different than anything I've played. I don't know how to even begin parsing this. And it takes a turn or two for new players to parse all that out. So this is not the kind of game you're just going to drop down a bunch of new players and just assume it's going to go smoothly. It could take a while. And yeah, again, Eric talked about this too, but this is a huge table hog. 9 players with all the cards that you get, you're going to be on the floor eventually. Unless you got a massive table. This is a huge table hog. There's just cards sprawled everywhere. Again, maybe that's a negative or not for you, but it's something that's worth mentioning. So those are my negatives.
So let's get into our final thoughts on Sidereal Confluence. Guys, we're going to want to know, would you recommend this game? Who would you recommend it to? What do you rate it? And do you feel like it should go on either our 10 or 25 game shelf? Let's start with you, Eric. What do you think?
I like it. It is a much better than average game, and the uniqueness of it puts it over the top for me. I think it's incredibly engaging. It rewards repeat play. And despite its clunky gameplay and unappealing aesthetics, I think it's pretty fun. I give it a 7 out of 10, and I would like to see it on our 25 game shelf at the very least.
Okay. Greg, what about you?
Yeah, we agree, actually. I give it a 7 too. That's where I'm at on this. It's not necessarily my type of game that I seek out to play, but with the player count here that it plays and the type of game it is, I can definitely see situations where I'm gonna be like, yeah, this is the perfect game for this situation. So it's definitely a game that goes on a shelf. It doesn't quite fit on the 10 game shelf just because that's getting tight, that shelf. There's so many good games on there at this point, but I think it definitely goes on the 25 game shelf. Yeah. So I would be curious what Eric would be thinking about getting rid of. There's quite a few games on there that I'd still be willing to get rid of because it's still kind of a new shelf. Yeah. So
all right, so Greg, explain to us the big screw up.
So this is future us.
Yes.
Hi.
We realized that we were talking about kicking off near and far in that video, and we already kicked it off in the video previously. I guess we didn't like it so much we wanted to kick it off twice.
You truly hated that game.
I did not hate. No, I did not hate.
You wanted to kick it off. You wanted to kick it off near and far.
That's right. Ha ha ha. We just lost half our subscribers on that joke. But yeah, so we already kicked it off, so we got to pick a different game to kick off.
So obviously the choice would be Ticket to Ride.
No, and I think in that video too, we were talking about, we already kicked off Carcassonne, but it looks like Carcassone's still on the list. So that's my vote.
Sure, and the other one that I mentioned was Splendor, but that got the first boot.
No,
right?
That one we kicked off already. Yeah,
that's what I thought. So yeah, Carcassonne is fine by me. What would remind me, past self? What was past friends? What was the thing that I said in that video?
You were talking about
that our listeners just heard.
Terraforming Mars.
That's right, and you don't want to discuss that.
I don't hate that one as much as you do. I think Carcassonne
fits the bill better. You think?
Equal amount of apathy from both of us.
I think Carcassonne is lower, possibly on my list anyway. So I'd have to double check that, but I'm fine with Carcassonne.
All right. So Carcassonne.
Goodbye,
okay,
Carcassonne.
Past self. That's what we're kicking off.
Okay. I just want to conclude this by saying that technically both versions that our watchers are going to see will be your past self. Just one will not be as far past as the other.
This is like a Star Trek paradox.
Yeah.
Excuse me, what are you doing? That's how I roll.
And what do you guys want to play for next time? What are we going to review next time? That's it.
If we can get together, I think we're trying to do Antiquity, Eric.
Yeah, that was the plan.
That's actually currently the highest thumbed, which I should mention now. I'm bringing it up. We have a geek list on BGG that you can request reviews or thumb games that are already there. And I think currently Antiquity is the highest thumbed item. So maybe we'll try to, since I own it already, we'll try to do that next time.
Or
Right.
the reason we decided to kind of put this one in the running, Sidereal Confluence, is it was mentioned in a comment by one of our watchers. So if that's more your style, you're not particularly familiar with BGG, go ahead and leave us a comment. We'll try to get around to it in our
but that watcher
incredibly
also did,
busy schedule.
Yeah, he also put it on the geek list too. So.
Did he? Okay, good for him.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So Antiquity probably sounds like next. And like I said, if you have something you'd like to see us review, then be sure to let us know. And we'll put a link to that geek list in the comments there. So I think that's it though for this time for Sidereal Confluence. Until then, this has been a piece of the action.
So these name stuff. It's like I remember this. I think I remember this episode now.
What is the episode? Do you like?
Is this the
jog my
one?
memory.
Is this the one where some guy was killing people when the Enterprise was being built, and like somehow their somehow like their telepathic stuff got imprinted onto the warp core or something, and it was something like they thought she was buried in the wall. Like I don't know, some weird thing where like they went down.
So it sounds kind of familiar, but
and it was actually kind of an
like
interesting episode, and I think there was. Yeah,
it's kind of like a pseudo like horror thriller type.
Yeah,
thing,
it kind
right?
of was. Yeah, and there was I think the episode opened up with someone like going to jump into the warp core or something, like, and they were like freaking like, "What are you doing?" And they had like snapped them out of it. I can't remember the exact details now, but now it's coming back. If that's the episode it is, and they're asking for a name.
Yeah, I have to just go off of a gut feeling.
I was going to go with Quan. I was going to go with Quan.
Okay.
That sounded the most. It could be because it's the first one you said, but that's.
Oh, well, you know what? This is why do they do stupid things like this? So it's asked in the question, it asks who was the half human, half Nepean lieutenant, but then the choices, there's 2 lieutenants and there's 2 ensigns. So it can't be the ensigns.
Okay.
So it has to be Lieutenant Daniel Kwan or Lieutenant William Hodges.
Well, I'm sticking with Kwan. That sounds vaguely familiar.
Micah?
Yeah, I have no memory of this episode either. My guess would like if I had to try to intuitively reconstruct what I think it would have been, I would have guessed some sort of Deanna Troi episode where she's dealing with, she have a couple of episodes where she was being, having problems with other telepaths or something like that. So I would have guessed that it would have been something like that. Even if I knew for an absolute fact that is what it was, that would not help me pinpoint a name. So sure, I'll go with Quan. Why not?
Okay, I'll go with Hodges then, just to be different. I'll put in Quan since that's the consensus. That is right. Lieutenant Daniel Kwan. I mean, I think that must have been, he must have had just a bit part, right? Because he commits suicide.
Like he barely is in the episode, if I remember right, because it's just in flashbacks.
Right, okay.
If he even does appear. So that's such a random name to recall.
Well, all right, let me ask you that, because this is a good question, is if we watch that episode and they don't say his full name, I feel like this question is...
Oh, they say his name. They say his full name.
They say, Lieutenant Daniel Kwan, why are you committing suicide?
No doubt. That sounds like TNG writing.
That does sound like TNG writing.
It does.
I gotta, so much of this book is like this though, where it's just like, here's a weird thing, pick a name.
Right.
And some of those get kind of boring. So next time I will curate a little better next time.
All right,
probably easy to pad out the Star Trek trivia book that you've been commissioned to write. So, okay. All right.